Good morning, everyone. We know that this week's Torah portion is one of the sources of people often refer to it as feminism in the Torah. You know, today we're still talking about questions: should women get equal pay for equal work? On this week's parsha, we have a story that there were 5 girls, 5 sisters, and they were the daughters of a man by the name of Tzlavchad. And Tzlavchad died in the desert. And the laws of inheritance, as were given over, were that girls do not inherit their father, only boys do. Because the men provide for their wives, so the women rely on their husbands, and the husbands are the ones who inherit. But these daughters of Tzlavchad, they brought a lawsuit against Moshe, so to speak. They came and they said, we want our property, we want our land. Why should we be discriminated against just because we're girls, just because we're daughters? Our father didn't have any sons, but does that mean that his land shouldn't be transferred to his daughters? Now, of course, it wasn't a greedy thing about real estate. Our rabbis say it was a love of the land of Israel. They wanted a portion in the land of Israel, just like all the Jews were going to receive a portion in the land of Israel. And what's amazing is that Moshe Rabbeinu was stumped. He didn't know what to answer. Now, if you remember, Moshe Rabbeinu was the one who set up the judicial system in the desert, where the most difficult questions should come to him. There are different layers of courts, like we have today, and Moshe Rabbeinu was the supreme court, so to speak, but the supreme court was God. When Moshe couldn't answer a question, he turned to Hashem for the answer. So Moshe turns to God and says, what should I tell these girls, these women? They say they want a portion in the land of Israel, their father's property. And God responds to Moshe and says, Kain benos tzlavchos dovers, they're 100% right. They should get a portion in the land. And the laws of inheritance evolve, in a sense, to include women, that if there are no sons, the daughters get the portion in the land of Israel. So women always say, you see, here's the first example in the Torah of women getting equal rights. And we're very proud of that. That's the way it should be, because women should. And that's what God concurred with Moshe Rabbeinu. But what's interesting is that our rabbis point to an insight in the story, and they say that why was it that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know the law? Because God was, so to speak, teaching him a lesson. Moshe Rabbeinu had said the most difficult question should come to me, and now he couldn't answer the question. It was teaching him not to be so sure of himself. Why? Because one of the things the daughters of Tzlavchad said was that our father died because of his sins in the desert, and there's a question what his sin was, but he didn't die because of the sin of Korach. Why did they bring up the fact that he didn't die because of the sin of Korach? So what they were trying to say was, our father wasn't a bad guy. He didn't attack you in the desert. He wasn't one of those who tried to undermine you. So they were trying to curry favor with Moshe Rabbeinu by saying, you see, our father never was part of that rebellion. And therefore Moshe Rabbeinu recused himself, because he said, once they tainted my perspective by trying to flatter me and saying, oh, our father wasn't one of those people who rebelled against you, now his view, his perspective, his vision was distorted, and therefore he felt he couldn't judge this matter, and he had to turn it over to God. And the lesson is so powerful that many times even small things, like the flattering words, could taint our perspective and make us incapable of distinguishing between truth and falsehood. And it's very hard to be truly objective, and we have to know when, like Moshe Rabbeinu, to turn it over to a higher power to get the answer, because we're blinded by our self-love. And, this week's parsha is all about sacrifices, but there's a story told about a guy who comes into a restaurant. And the waiter says, what would you like for dinner? He says, I love fish. You have fish? I love fish. He says, sure. He goes into the kitchen. He tells the chef, the guy on table 6 loves fish. What do we got? He says, we got fresh salmon in the aquarium right here. We have a live fish tank, Takes out a salmon, puts it on the cutting board. He zetzes it, cuts it up, puts up the frying pan with the onions and the oil sizzling, and he throws the fresh fish into the frying pan. And the waiter walks out and he says, it's a pretty mean thing to do to a fish that you love. We often say we love this, we love that, but what we're really saying is we love ourselves. He doesn't mean he loves the fish. If you love the fish, you let it swim in the ocean. If you love the taste and the enjoyment and the pleasure of fish, then you kill it and you eat it, right? So sometimes we think we're professing our love for something, we're really just talking about our self-love. And therefore it's very easy for a human being to be tainted by his own desires, by his own likes and dislikes. And therefore Moshe Rabbeinu, even as the greatest teacher of law, recognized when he had to step back that once the daughters of Tzlachta said, our father wasn't one of those rebellious guys, they were trying to get him on their side, to win favor, he said, I can't judge this case anymore. I need to ask God what the answer is.